Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hi, this is Linda Thompson, your host for The Author Show. After guest author Darwin H took a trip to the American Southwest, he was inspired to write in a different style from his usual poetry, and The Castle of Thiendra was the result. I love historical fiction, and The Castle of Thiendra sounds like a really good one. Let's learn more from our guest, Darwin. Welcome to The Author Show.
Thank you.
Darwin, please share with our audience a short synopsis of The Castle of Thiendra.
In the Castle of Thiendra, there is a woman soldier in the 15th century that is basically a very unheard of thing at that time. And she had a time trying to explain everyone her abilities for battle. And she was defeated in a battle that had taken place, and she got another army together. And when this other army was put together to attack the castle once again, outside wizards that had came involved in the instance, and this created a whole new path for them to follow. And it all came to a point of bringing up actions from the past. It was a continuance of what was going on from this time.
How would you describe your writing style in The Castle of Thiendra?
The writing style, it follows a pattern of the time. When I was writing the story, one thing that it was said was not to focus on the language that's spoken at the time. You just got to tell it like you're talking to an individual. So I tried to write it out into a story form that the people could understand more so than trying to figure out the language that was being used.
There are some phenomenal photos on your website and the cover of your book. Did you shoot these?
Yes, I did. Photography has been a hobby of mine that I have gathered several pictures, and I'm starting to use some of those in my writing and my covers.
You have previously written poetry, so did you have a different type of reader in mind while you were writing your novel?
Actually, yes, I did. Poetry was something that it seemed like that there was very little interest shown in, and I noticed that when I started looking around and trying to catch people's interest with it. And I started a different style of writing for that reason, and it was just kind of one of those strange deals that's what came to me, so that's what I wrote down. When I started this story, I had no idea how long of a story it was going to be. I thought maybe 5 or 6 pages because I'd never written anything of any length. And on about page 12, I decided maybe it wasn't going to end like that, and it just kept on going. And it ended up being a little longer than I had originally planned. It is 268 pages, so that's a little longer.
That is about the average size of a novel, so congratulations for keeping on going. What was the inspiration for the story of Thiendra?
The inspiration was when I was driving in Arizona. I was looking at the different rock formations around, and I seen that picture there, and I snapped it and drove right on by and never gave it another thought. After I got home and I printed up the picture, I looked at that, and I thought to myself, oh, wow, that looks like a castle, the Castle of Thiendra. And at that point, I started thinking about the story behind the Castle of Thiendra, and this is what came together.
Well, Thiendra was back in the 15th century, so are we going to see her return in a sequel or a series?
Actually, I do have a sequel started, but I got sidetracked at that time, and I've been kind of busy with some family instances for the last couple of years, and I'm trying to get back on track at this time. I have started where I can continue on with the Castle of Thiendra.
Are your characters 100% from your imagination, or do they take after people you know?
I can't say 100% because there are some that I have used people that I know as an example and use as a reference to make the story come together. There are other names and characters that it was totally drawn out of the middle of the air. So that kind of goes 50-50 on that instance.
You've written poetry, and now you've written your first novel. Which do you prefer to write?
In a way, that is kind of a trick question. I wrote poetry for several years, and that was what I thought would be my only writing. And once I started writing the novel, I have not written one more poem. So obviously, from that, I take it that I like the fiction better.
Are you a writer that outlines, or do you just start writing and it just flows?
When I started Thiendra, I had a notebook I would scribble a few notes in, but by the time I finished Thiendra, I would sit down and be typing into the story and work up to a point and walk away, and I would come back and just pick up from that point. So I would say, no, I'm not an outlining type person. I do a little bit of it, but a lot of times I will just use my imagination to put it on paper.
Most authors have a message they want to share. So what is your message in the Castle of Thiendra?
One message that I have there is you hear a lot of women now who questions their ability to present themselves to the world and be accepted. And that's one thing Thiendra does in this time. She is at a point that is totally unheard of for society to have a female soldier. And she presents herself to the world to show them she is the soldier that she says she is. And that's one point that I think is made there in this story.
You are one of the rare guys who recognize that women have strength. So was it easy to take on the persona of Thiendra while you were writing about her?
In a way, it made it hard. There was times that I would run into instances that I would ask women about different things just to get an idea. I'm not saying that's exactly how I would write it, but it would give me a thought to apply to a situation as it develops. And that did help me, because I had the same thought as I was writing about that. With the woman there, you have a man's approach in this, and it's always a different angle, and many times people find fault with that. So I tried to keep it more so from a woman's perspective.
What is it about the Castle of Thiendra that makes it stand out in a crowd?
The part that makes it stand out is a lot in the ending of the book, how everything comes together at the end. It's a little different than what a person first thinks when they start reading it. Of course, I think that's one of the things that makes a story is that little bit of a twist in there to where you can see something different than you first imagined.
Is there any other book that you can think of that might be compared with the Castle of Thiendra?
In a way, that is kind of a trick question. I had editors that kind of laughed at me a little bit, but I'm not much of a reader. And they couldn't comprehend that I would actually write stories but not be a reader, and I don't read that much. So it would be hard for me to have a story to compare to how it would be similar to it.
That is a rarity, to have a writer that is not a reader. So was it easy for you to go from poetry to writing a novel and getting your head into how to develop the characters? Because there's got to be more characters than just Thiendra. And
absolutely.
What was the process there?
Like I said a while ago, I would relate to what type of a person they was and try to, this may sound kind of silly, I don't know, almost kind of live their life in some respects to kind of get the idea. And then put it on paper, then you can go back over through and see what sounds right and what doesn't. But that was the basic pattern that I used to try to get the characters down and try to keep them separate so they didn't all sound like the other one.
Is there any what you might call fantasy in your book, and is it really historical?
Yes, the fantasy part is with where the wizard is released and he has the crystals of power that are used. And the crystal of Felicia is one that has been hidden for 300 years when the wizard was cast under a spell. All this was released and the powers was reopened for Thiendra to claim as she claims the castle.
I find it remarkable that people can come up with things like this, and particularly when you're not a reader yourself. So how did you come up with all of this?
That is kind of a trick question in some respects when I look at it like that, because I would sit and I would think about, you always hear people taking, you'll hear a story and you will take pieces of it and put it together to form one of your own. And I asked myself a few times as I was writing the Castle of Thiendra if that's what I was doing. But I didn't. I had to sit and, I guess you would say, imagine the things that was going on here to make it all come together and work with the rest of the scenes in there.
What kind of feedback have you had so far from readers of your book?
I have had different feedback. One man that I had talked to, he was in his 70s, and he was a real avid reader, and I gave him a copy of this to read, and he acted like it was okay, but it wasn't his type of a story. I've found people from the ages of about 15 to 35, roughly, would be a very good age group for this book. The type of story that it is more catches the interest of that age group. There was one lady I was talking to that I was telling her about the story. I got kind of tickled at her, too, because she looked at me and she said, "Oh, that's just not my kind of story. Now, if that would have been a Western, I could have just took that and just read it all night long." And I had to laugh at her a little bit, but then I could see where she was coming from, too, because I realize everyone is different and each person has their own taste.
So where can we learn more about you, and where can we purchase the Castle of Thiendra?
Well, the Castle of Thiendra is available at different sites online, and any of the bookstores can order it. It is available for them to order, and Amazon carries it, and it is on Barnes & Noble. CreateSpace carries it. There's multiple sources to find it. Type in Darwin H. Hayes or the Castle of Thiendra, and a search will take you to those sites.
In the minute we have left, Darwin, will you please share with our listeners one thing about your novel that will be an inspiration for them to buy it and read it?
The thing I think about is how a woman makes a stand against a kingdom that she has had a grudge with for her basic entire life. And by making this stand and combining the powers that's around her, it creates basically, you could say, a community effort in accomplishing the goal that she set out with in the first place.
Darwin, it has been a real pleasure talking with you today. I am just delighted to find a gentleman writer that understands women and the fact that we actually can be strong. Thank you for sharing the story of Thiendra with us, and I'd love to talk with you again when you release your next book.
That would be great. Thank you.
I live in the American Southwest and understand how the scenery can inspire people to write wonderful stories. The Castle of Thiendra sounds like just one of those. Give me a book with a beautiful setting, an interesting bunch of characters, a different place of time, and I'm going to settle on the sofa surrounded by my kitties, my quilt, and a cup of tea for the duration. I hope you, like me, feel the same way about Darwin's book, The Castle of Thiendra. Please visit theauthorshow.com to listen to other features.